Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns open their home schedule Sunday with a less than perfect 31-21 win over the Houston Texans in front of a capacity crowd. With the win under the belt, the Browns can settle into their long season. Here to break down everything with me is Dave Chudowsky from the WKYC Morning News. How are you, Dave?
Scott, I'm doing good. I was able to fulfill my promise of eating Chub Crunch on the morning show yesterday. That's what we do on the morning show. You know, we have serious news, but every once in a while, we like to lighten it up. And a few weeks ago, I promised that I would get the Chub Crunch, and Maureen, Holly, and I had Chub Crunch Monday morning, and it tasted great. A victory Monday. And I'll tell you, I will say this, though. And all the years of losing games, I would have, and so many Browns fans would have given their right arm for a win like Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, with the expectation, so I want to preface that by saying wins are wins in the NFL, and they're not easy. And gosh, we would have loved to have had that win so many times in the past. That said, do you almost feel like you felt better after their performance in Kansas City than you did this past Sunday?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Chud. I think a lot of fans probably did. I think if you break down and analyze the film, I think especially offensively, they looked better against Kansas City, especially in that first half. Kansas City's a much better team than the Texans. So yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think they looked better, and I think people felt better. But the reality is, like you mentioned, wins are what matters, and they got one under the belt, and that's, you know, like I mentioned in the opening, that's key, right? I feel like if you get the first one out of the way, they can settle into the season, and there's not as much pressure to get that first one. Not, you know, we analyze every game and we break it down and it's under the microscope, but you have to remember it's a 17-game season. So, you know, if they lose another game, it's not the end of the world, but you need that first one. I think that calms everybody down. It feels like, okay, we're in this marathon now. So I get the reaction, but I do think you need to take a step back. I was looking at a email I got from somebody from my mailbag, and it was the same kind of thing. They just don't feel the excitement after the win. And I get it, but I think you have to kind of change the way you view it, because not every win is going to be perfect. Not every game is going to be perfect. And if you win by 10 points in the NFL, I don't care if it's you're playing the second or third string quarterback, that means something. And I think there needs to be more appreciation for any win.
Yeah, good point. They did win by 10 points. I mean, that is the bottom line. Now, here's the thing, though. We both predicted 31-17. We were very close. That's 2 weeks in a row, right, that we've hit on the winning score, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't we have – yeah, I mean –
we're real close. We were close both games, yeah.
Real close. So we're off on the score a little bit. We didn't cover in Vegas, right?
Right.
That's okay, though. But is Houston maybe better than we thought?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Chud. I was talking to one of the reporters after the game, and he's, you know, and I said, hey, it feels like, you know, the Texans, everything feels dysfunctional to me. And he said, if you take the Deshaun Watson stuff out of the equation, he said it's really not. You know, they have Nick Caserio is the GM. He came over from the Patriots. He said they signed a lot of veterans to one-year contracts to kind of settle down the roster. So it's not like this young, inexperienced team. And, you know, you could tell that looking at the depth chart. I mean, they have veteran players, especially former Browns, like a guy like Christian Kirksey, right? Like, he can play in this league. If he were on the Browns, he'd probably be starting. Now, they decided a couple of years ago not to pay him what his contract was because he probably wasn't worth that contract. But he's a legitimate player in this league. Terence Mitchell started a corner for them, started a corner all year for the Browns a year ago. Now, yes, they tried to upgrade this offseason, but he's still a player, and he was a player on a starter on a playoff team a year ago in Cleveland. And they have a lot of guys like that throughout the roster, right? Tyrod Taylor, I know he left at halftime, but you saw how effective he was in the first half, and that's not just a Browns defense thing. It's Tyrod Taylor's a veteran in this league. They're running backs. I mean, they have David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay and Mark Ingram, the second, right? So I do think that the Texans were better than I had given them credit for, just because I saw all the headlines in the offseason and they had to settle for David Culley as coach. And all those things, I think, left a perception on me that maybe wasn't entirely accurate. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, good point. So you bring up Tyrod Taylor, and I'm just going to ask, I don't even need an explanation. I just want Scott Petrak giving me his honest opinion. If he doesn't get hurt and plays the second half, do the Texans win that game?
No, I don't love that narrative. I understand it. And obviously he's a better player than Davis Mills. And he, I can't say that he wouldn't have affected the second half, but even when he was out there, and once Baker came back out of the locker room and scored to make it 14-14, and then the Browns got to stop at the end of the half, like, I felt that the Browns were going to turn it on in the second half. Now it helps that Tyrod wasn't out there and Davis Mills was, but I still think the Browns would have found a way to win the home opener. Maybe it wouldn't have been 10 points. Maybe it comes down to needing to stop at the end and it's only a field goal. But I think they win the game regardless.
And I agree with you. And I heard from some people that they thought that if he stayed in the game, the Browns would have lost. But I agree with pretty much everything you just said there. And I think that's an astute, smart answer. I think at the end of the day, Tyrod would have made a mistake, or the defense would have caught up. I think also, too, the bottom line is that they just wore down the Texans defense. So now I will say this, when we made our predictions of 31-17, I thought, and I said this on the air yesterday morning on Go, our morning show on WKYC, cheap plug. Anyway, I thought they'd be up like 31-7 or 31-10, and Houston might score a touchdown late to make it 31-17. I did not think, and I'm just being honest here, because we can pat ourselves on the back for being right on the prediction, but I think we're pretty honest when we get stuff wrong. I thought that they would be up and not have to come back like they did.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought it'd be easier, right? It would feel easier. There wouldn't be the 3-point spread in the fourth quarter like there wound up being. But, Donovan Peoples-Jones fumbles on about the 35, right? That takes points off the board. Baker Mayfield throws the interception, which wasn't his fault, but he still throws it. That takes points off the board. So the Browns did not play their best game, and that contributed to it. Defensively, they gave up too many points. They only gave up 305 yards, I think, and that's not a lot of yardage in today's NFL, but they gave up the 2 first-half scores, but one of them came off of, after the Baker interception. And I know the Browns' first touchdown came off the muff punt, so I get the back and forth. I just thought the Browns were sloppier early, and I didn't necessarily expect that, especially because they played so well in that first half against the Chiefs. So I think that's why it stayed closer as long as it did. So I guess my point is, if things had changed, if things had gone differently in the first quarter and a half, the no fumble, no interception, then I think if the Browns had gotten a 10-point lead earlier, then it would have had a chance to really expand that lead, because I don't think Houston's a team that plays catch-up very well. They rely on their running game, and the fact that they were either in it or ahead in that first half let the Texans settle in, and therefore it became a fourth quarter game. And you just can't always predict that, right? You can't predict that Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to fumble the only time he catches a ball, and Baker's going to throw a pick because Anthony Schwartz quits running the route, right? I didn't see those things happening, and then all of a sudden you have a close ball game.
Are we looking at a team that right now is just a one-half team? They played so well in the first half against Kansas City, then not in the second half. Then this past Sunday, they don't play well in the first half, but play well in the second half. This is a pattern after 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still only 2 weeks, right? The season's still young. I hate to make any, broad judgments, but Baker Mayfield brought that up after the game, said, we haven't played 60 minutes yet. And that was frustrating to him. And, we talked about the fan reaction. I thought to the win. I thought Baker's reaction was subdued. And, maybe Kevin Stefanski, too, in the locker room, bringing up, okay, we got a lot of stuff to fix. And, that was a takeaway for Baker is we haven't put 60 minutes together and we made too many mistakes, meaning specifically the turnovers. You just can't have those, right? And over a 17-game season, that's the kind of stuff you need to clean up. When you play the Ravens and the Chiefs of the world, maybe even the Raiders of the world, you have to eliminate those, because if you don't, then every game becomes a fourth quarter game. And against the best teams, those one or two mistakes at critical times are the difference between a win and a loss. And that's what we saw in Kansas City, right? Is if you make too many big mistakes in the second half of a game or whenever in a game, all of a sudden you look at the end and you go, that's why we lost.
So when I made my projection for total wins on the year, the one thing that just stuck with me and the reason why I didn't go 12, 13 and, that type of deal was the defense. And so far, it's a major concern. I mean, we talked about how this is a group of talented guys, but they would have to gel. And for whatever reason, it's not happening right now.
No, it's not. And obviously we need to discuss this. There's a couple of right. And again, like, you're on, everybody's on Twitter. Not everybody. You, we're on Twitter during the game, right? And I'm also on text chain. So I get, my knucklehead buddies sitting at home and I get every hot take that they have, right? I don't respond, but they pop into my phone.
Are these knuckleheads listening to the podcast?
I sure hope so. I know at least one of them is. He's the least of the knuckleheads, though. But, you get the fire Joe Woods, right? What's Joe Woods doing? All those kind of things. And that reaction was out there on Twitter as well. And I get the frustration. But I'll repeat that we're 2 games into a season. You can't make any judgments after 2 games. And I do think we have to keep in mind that, number one, the first game was against the Chiefs. And you have to – so everything that happens, you need to take that into account, right? It's the best offense in the league. Number two,
they lost. By the way, they're 1-1.
Right, and then the Ravens gave up 35 points to the Chiefs. Right, I mean that happens. The Ravens have a big time defense. You give up 35 points to the Chiefs every week. That's just what happens. Not that you don't try to prevent that, but let's be realistic. The other part is we talked all offseason, Sean, about all the new faces on this defense, and while they could say, "Hey, it's not going to take us all year to gel, and we'll have it ready week 1." That was unrealistic. There are growing pains when you have all these new faces, when you don't play a lot in the preseason, which I was behind that decision, but that impact is felt when you get to the regular season. And I think that's fine, but I think we have to remember that. And, Myles Garrett after the game said, yeah, it's different. And Jadeveon Clowney and I and the rest of the defensive front, right? It's 3 new guys in Myles. Clowney, Malik Jackson, Malik McDowell. They're all new. You can throw Tack McKinley in there too. He's new. Andrew Billings as well. You would think that the D-line, it doesn't matter, right? You pin your ears back, you go get the quarterback. Myles Garrett said, no, it takes time for us to learn how to work together. And if that's true for the defensive line, it's true for the back 7 where there's way more communication. There's way more space. You need to trust the guys around you more. So I still think that the talent is a big upgrade over a year ago. I still think this defense will continue to improve as we go through the regular season. And I think it's too early to say that it's Joe Woods' fault or the talent isn't good enough. I just don't buy those yet. I need a much bigger sample size. Now, I will say that the pass rush wasn't nearly good enough against the Texans. Myles Garrett, you would see him every once in a while. He drew a hold at the end of the first half, but that was about it. Right? No sacks from Myles. I'm not sure if he hit the quarterbacks. That can't happen. And then third down has been awful. For 2 weeks, they ranked 31st in the league on third down. The other team's converting 61%, I think. That can't happen. Part of that's Joe Woods, but part of that is the players. I went back and watched the Davis Mills drive. I mean, I watched the whole game, but that Davis Mills drive in the third and fourth quarters, right, where the Texans scored to cut it to 3-point lead. They have like a 3rd and 13, and he dumps it off to David Johnson. Troy Hill misses a tackle. Malik McDowell comes flying up from the line of scrimmage and pushes him forward about 4 yards, and he gets a first down. And Malcolm Smith gets hurt on the play and falls down to the ground, can't get up, and he's where David Johnson wound up being. So that's not Joe Woods' fault. If somebody makes a tackle, if Malcolm Smith doesn't get hurt, then they get off the field, and maybe we're talking about a 17-point win, and we're not talking about a 75-yard touchdown drive led by, a rookie third-string quarterback. So it's not all Joe Woods. I'm not saying none of it's Joe Woods, but I really think people should have some patience with this entire unit.
Grant Delpit looked pretty good.
He did. And I'm glad you said that too, because, when we talk about this defense getting better throughout the year, I think Grant Delpit will play a big role in that because he showed up and I wasn't sure how he would look, right? The guy hasn't played since he was at LSU in 2019. You just never know. He's an athlete, but it's different watching his college film and watching him a little bit in training camp to big lights of a Sunday. And he showed up. He played all over the field. He lined up deep. He lined up near the line of scrimmage. He lined up split out wide. He came flying from center field to make a tackle near the line of scrimmage in the second quarter. He had that sack where he timed the blitz perfectly and drilled the quarterback. So I was impressed by him. And with Delpit playing like that, it really gives Joe Woods the ability to use that dime package that he really wants to use with John Johnson III and Ronnie Harrison Jr., the three safeties together. And if I expect this defense to grow, that's one of the areas I expect it to grow, is because they will use more of that dime package that Joe Woods loves. And then he can call the game like he wants to call it. And I think he can be more free. I mean, the Browns, I think the Browns have only blitzed like 15% of the time. And that just shows you that Woods has started the season in a conservative mode. Now, part of that is Kansas City, right? You don't want to blitz Mahomes because you leave guys vulnerable deep down the field. But they didn't blitz a bunch against the Texans. And I think that's Woods trying to kind of growing into the season with all these new faces is, okay, we're going to start out kind of conservative. We're going to trust our front four to get there. And now the front four needs to do a much better job of getting there. But I think once Woods feels more comfortable with the young guys in the back seven, then he can get creative. Then he can start to be more aggressive and take some chances. And that could really help transform this defense.
Hey, you talked about that a lot on the pods leading up to the season about that dime defense. Yes. So you're all over that for sure. Let's move to the offense now. Anything else on the defense you want to hit?
Real quick. They need to figure out the linebacker spot a little bit, right? They missed Anthony Walker Jr. He's on IR with the hamstring. He'll miss at least 2 more games. Sione Takitaki, the strong side starter, has a hamstring injury. Stefanski said he's week to week. So you're down 2 of your starters there. Now, the Browns will use a lot of nickel in general. They'll use that dime. So you probably only need to have 2 linebackers out there. And you have Malcolm Smith, and you have Mac Wilson, and you have JOK, and you have Elijah Lee. So they can figure it out. But until you get, especially Anthony Walker Jr. back, I don't think the defense will live up to its capabilities, because I think he really is such a key, and he's the lead communicator and the signal caller. And I mentioned Miles. You also have to mention Denzel struggling, especially early. And I thought Denzel bounced back after that really rough opening drive where he gave up, I think it was 3 completions, and Tyrod Taylor just went after him. If your defense is going to rise to where they want it to be, right? And Grant Delpit says, hey, I still think it can be a top 5 defense. Your best players need to play well, and maybe even better than well, right? They need to play at a Pro Bowl level. And Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward did not do that against the Texans. So when we talk about, okay, why was the defense bad? Again, it's not all Joe Woods. You need your best players to play that way. And that didn't happen against the Texans. Now, I expect over the long haul of the season, both those guys to be Pro Bowl type players. But this 1 week, they were not.
Well, and that goes into the next thing, injuries.
Yeah.
Before the season, we talked about defense was a concern, or you had to kind of watch it grow, and that's what it's doing now. Injuries. You got the linebacker injury you just talked about, but you also have now Jarvis Landry, and you're already missing Odell. Now Landry's hurt. What's the latest? What do we know right now as far as Jarvis moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be weeks. Is certainly what it sounds like. Stefanski did not want to even rule him out for Sunday. But when you call a guy week to week, that means he's going to miss likely multiple games, at least one game. Usually it's multiple games, right? That's where the delineation is between day to day is, man, we hope he can go either this week or next week. Week to week is, all right, we don't have expectations for right now for him to come back. Now, if they don't put him on IR, that's a better sign, right? And Stefanski said they will make that decision this week. Maybe Jarvis is fighting them, saying, hey, it's not going to take me, because if you go on IR, you miss a mandatory 3 games, right? You can miss more than that, but a minimum of 3 games. So maybe Jarvis is fighting him, saying, hey, you know me, I don't miss time, right? He's never missed a game before for injury. I'll be back sooner rather than later. Don't put me on IR. Don't make me miss 3 games. What if I only have to miss 1? What if I only have to miss 2? So I think the Browns will do all they can not to put him on IR. But you never know what else happens and how the roster is affected, and maybe they need to clear a spot. But that's a big loss, Chud. I mean, he's the heart and soul of this team. He brings energy. He's Baker's most reliable target. He's a playmaker. We've seen him, he's got, he had that streak of 2 catches in every game, but he's also has a ton of games where he has at least 5 catches. I mean, he's productive. He's a heart and soul, all those things. Like, I don't think we can overstate what Jarvis means to this team when you combine his on-field ability just with his leadership and all the intangibles. So it's a real big loss. Now, it could be deflected if Odell comes back this week, and I think there's a chance that he comes back. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski was not ready to commit to that when we talked to him on Monday. But, Odell has been trending toward coming back, whether that's going to be week 3 or week 4, week 5. I think it'll be sooner rather than later. And it wouldn't surprise me if Odell took Jarvis's injury and used that as the final motivation, maybe the final impetus to say, okay, let me get over that last mental hurdle and say, yes, I can go play and kind of fill in for my best buddy, right? Because they're super tight friends. We all know that. I could see Odell saying, hey, I'm ready to go. Give me the green light. And that would help a lot, right? If you get Odell, swap him in for Jarvis, then at least you have one big-time receiver out there. Because you tell me what you think about this, Judd, but, I really like Donovan Peoples-Jones. I love the potential and speed of Anthony Schwartz. We all know how reliable Rashard Higgins is. But don't you love those guys a lot better as 3, 4, and 5 instead of 1, 2, and 3?
Oh, it's a huge difference. And that was going to be my next question to you is you're basically talking about a group that looked like a huge strength on this team. All of a sudden, not so much if you don't have Landry and Odell out there. I mean, then you got to start questioning the wide receiver position, right? That's kind of what you're alluding to.
Exactly. I mean, Baker I think it's 6 targets that Baker had for the wideouts after Jarvis left on the second play. And that includes 2 to Demetric Felton, who's a running back / receiver, right? So, part of that was the shoulder injury. Stefanski did not want Baker to get hit after that injury, so he called the game differently. They didn't throw the ball down the field. But part of it is Baker looks at the line of scrimmage and goes, there's no Odell, there's no Jarvis. Do I trust these guys to beat man coverage? Do I trust Schwartz to run the right route when he hung me out to dry on that interception? So if there's no Jarvis and Odell, and even if Odell plays, but he's limited, right? Because you assume he wouldn't have his full, he wouldn't go all game in his first game back. I think Stefanski and Baker need to approach the game differently. And that means you run the ball more. And we saw that in the fourth quarter. When the Texans made it a 3-point game, Stefanski turned to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So I think you would see more of that against Chicago on Sunday. Now, Chicago would know that, and it'll be harder to run, but I think you do say, okay, we gotta turn to those guys, and then you throw to the tight ends more, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. Say, okay, if we don't have our talent on the outside, we cater to the talent we do have, and that's a running game we trust and really love, and it's 3 tight ends that we think are among the best group in the league. If you're the Browns, let's take advantage of that. So I would think that the game plan, especially if Odell doesn't play, would look substantially different than in a normal week just because of the drop-off in talent at the wideout spot.
Yeah, I like Harrison Bryant. I think that's a weapon you could use. Felton, that was a beautiful touchdown to watch. So there's definitely – the good news is when you do have some injuries happen like this, and yes, losing Landry is a huge loss, leadership and ability on the field, but at least you have some depth here and some other options, whereas in the past you didn't.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Now, and you still have some depth at receiver. I'm not saying you don't. And there's 4 guys, right? Schwartz and Peoples-Jones and Higgins and Fountain. You say, okay, they're NFL players. They're not, superstars like Jarvis and Odell are. But you're right. The bigger picture is there's depth across the offense. So if you lose a couple guys and get, quote, in your depth, like Stefanski says, when you have multiple injuries, you can tweak things and you can go a different direction. And not every team can do that, but the Browns are talented enough where they can do that.
How much fun is it, though, just to watch them pound it on the ground and just wear out a defense at the end of the game, what they can do with Chubb and Hunt? It is just a thing of beauty.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And that touchdown run that Chubb had, right, I think it's 26-yarder. He didn't think he got touched. You watch the replay, and one guy tries to tackle him, kind of midsection, and it's like he doesn't even touch him. Chubb just runs through it. Wyatt Teller's blocking his guy, 6-7 yards downfield. It's a huge hole. It's a well-schemed and designed play. Yeah, it is fun, and not every team can do that. And that's why the Browns, that's why they try to keep those guys fresh so that they can take over the game in the fourth quarter. And that's what Chubb and Hunt do, right? They take it over in the fourth quarter.
All right, it's time to get to that segment on the show brought to you by Petrak's Pebbles. It is the Baker Mayfield update. Where are we at with him this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think what he showed us again Sunday, and not that he needed to show it to us, but how tough he is, right? He leaves a game in what looks like, it is a painful injury. He said it was after the game. You could tell on the field he's sitting there with his left shoulder hanging, doesn't miss a snap. And that's so important to him not to miss a snap, but obviously it's hugely important to the team. But it speaks to his toughness, and it speaks to just simply availability. And, like I said, I'm watching the Browns game on Monday, right? Or on Sunday. That's where my focus is, right? I'm tweeting, I'm watching, I'm taking notes, I'm doing all that stuff. But every once in a while, you hear something about the other games going on, right? The flash, the score inside the stadium, or it'll pop up on Twitter. And you also see Tua leaves for Miami. Dalton leaves for Chicago, right? And there were more than that, but those are the 2 quarterbacks that pop into my head. My point being, Baker is available, and he's available every week, and he's available just about every snap. And it's been that way since he took over for Tyrod Taylor in week 3 in 2018. Now, this isn't to say that he could never get hurt, and people should be knocking on wood. But there's something to be said when you do it for year after year after year and play 16 games. It gives your team a comfort level. It gives the organization a comfort level. And that's really important. Like, I don't think I can overstate the importance of his availability. So, when we talk about contract, Judd, and I don't want to get bogged down in that, but when you talk about is he worth X number of dollars, the fact that he's there every Sunday is a big check mark in Baker's negotiations, at least in my opinion. His agent should harp on that because it's huge. It means everything that you start a quarterback to be out there every week in just about every snap. So he once again impressed me. He came back. He scored that touchdown on the scramble, which was huge, and it showed I think it was more of a him saying, hey, I'm back. We're not going to lose this game. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And that includes, scoring from 5 yards out and firing the ball into the wall in front of the dog pound. So, and I haven't even mentioned that he went 19 for 21, and the only 2 incompletions were he overthrew Njoku in the second quarter on a seam route. And I asked Baker about it, and he was kicking himself because Nick Chubb ran a simple hook on the left sideline in front of the Browns bench. And Baker said, I should have just thrown it to Chubb. And if he does that, that takes one of the incompletions away. And the only other incompletion was the next play when Schwartz cut off that route and there was the interception to Justin Reed. And that's obviously the play Baker got hurt on. So if he makes a better decision on the first incompletion and Schwartz doesn't quit on the second one, Baker doesn't throw an incompletion, right? And he still has 90.5% for the day, which is a career high. He's leading the league at 81.6% completion percentage through 2 games. So the start Baker has gotten off to, I think, is really important. And I think it is the next step in how much progress he made over the second half of last season.
Yeah, refresh my memory. Wasn't it his issue 2 years ago was the accuracy?
Yeah. That was there was turnovers and accuracy, right? He threw too many interceptions and he missed too many throws. And the reason that was concerning is that was his calling card coming out of Oklahoma.
Right. That's it. Yeah.
That he was the accurate quarterback. So when he wasn't, especially when completion percentage numbers across the league continue to climb, right? It used to be like 60% you could live with. Now it's almost like 68, 70%. It's just, the rules make it easier for the offense. There's more, bubble screens and short passes, RPOs to make it easier to build up that completion percentage. And Baker was lagging. And that was a concern because obviously he doesn't have perfect, he doesn't have ideal height. He's a good athlete, but he's not a great athlete. So, and he's got a big time arm. There's no doubt about that. He's got a legit big time NFL arm. But how does he separate himself, right? How did Drew Brees separate himself? He was the hardest working, smartest quarterback, and he was elite. He had elite accuracy. So when you think, okay, how's Baker going to become one of those top 5-8 quarterbacks? Yeah, big arm, needs to work crazy hard, needs to be super smart, needs to be as competitive as he is, but he also needs to complete. He also needs to be accurate and complete a really high percentage of passes. And I feel like he's starting to get back to that, and the numbers bear that out.
Anything else from the Texans win? Or are you ready to move on to the Bears?
No, I think I'm looking at my notes. We covered everything I wanted to talk about with the Texans.
Well, there you go. How about that? And I didn't even see your notes. Fields or Dalton? Who's it going to be?
Yeah, I mean that's the big question, right? It sounds like Chicago wants it to be Dalton, right? They didn't go with Coach Matt Nagy. Did not go with Justin Fields in Week 1. He continues to resist, even though there's a lot of outside pressure to make the switch to the rookie from Ohio State. I don't feel like he wants to use the injury to Dalton, the bone bruise, to say, yeah, we're just going to go to Fields. So I think he's holding out hope that it can be Dalton. I think we're going to see Fields. We'll see Fields some, even if Dalton starts, right? They use him in a package. They bring him in first series. But I feel like the Bears are still kind of committed to Andy Dalton, and he played well in that until he got hurt against Cincinnati on Sunday, right? They win that game. Dalton played well early. Fields did not play great in the second half. He had a really bad interception that kind of let Cincinnati back in the game in the fourth quarter when it looked like Chicago was just going to kind of end it. So I think Chicago wants to go with Dalton, but it's all up to the knee, right? I mean, he just hurt it running. It was a non-contact injury. He was scrambling out of bounds, and he just came up lame. So I think it's too early to tell, but it'll be interesting because Fields gives you a dynamic that Dalton doesn't, right? Not that Dalton can't scramble a little bit, but Fields can run it. He can do the zone out, the read option. He can get out and really hurt you with his legs, which, anybody who watched Ohio State saw that time and again. And he's got a bigger arm than Dalton, but he's raw. He's a rookie. He's going to make mistakes where Andy Dalton is a lot like Tyrod Taylor. He's going to take what's in front of him. He's a smart quarterback. He's going to go to the right spot. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
How are you on Fields? Do you have the high expectations that so many do? There's so many that think Atlanta or Denver should have drafted him, and that Chicago caught a break that he dropped so far.
Yeah, I agree with that. I liked him a lot at Ohio State. Obviously, I don't think he's probably not. I don't know if he's not as polished as Mac Jones. Mac Jones just feels like he can step in, and he has stepped in for New England. And New England's not asking him to do everything, but he feels like he's NFL ready. Obviously, the Bears didn't quite feel that way about Fields. And I probably would say the same thing. There's a little rawness there. But I think he's got a huge ceiling. I didn't study the quarterbacks in this draft like I had in the past because I knew the Browns were going to take one. So I didn't watch a lot of Zach Wilson. I didn't watch a lot of Trey Lance. But it certainly felt like Fields should have been in that discussion for, to go in that top 5 when his resume in college certainly was better than both those guys. So I understand Ohio State fans would say, hey, why did this guy fall? He deserved to go higher. I get that argument for sure.
Give us a quick scouting report on Chicago. You just talked about the quarterbacks. They have a good running back in David Montgomery. They have some quality receivers, Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
What are the big things that we need to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, Allen Robinson's a big one, right? He's their number 1 receiver. But I'm stuck on Montgomery. I watched that Cincinnati game last night, and he's really good, right? I think he has a streak of 100 yards and a touchdown that's the best in franchise history for the Bears. And we know they had Walter Payton and Gale Sayers, right? I mean, that's saying something when you have that kind of streak and you're at the top of that list in that franchise. He's just a really good player, and he can catch the ball, can run it out of the backfield. I think no matter who's playing quarterback, he'll be the focus of that offense. I feel like they want to play a grind it out, slow it down game. They don't want to get in the 30s. They want to play, in the teens or the low 20s from a score perspective. On defense, they're always solid. They have a lot of good players over there. It starts with Khalil Mack up front. Roquan Smith, the linebacker, had a huge play. He had a pick 6 against Joe Burrow in the Bengals. They intercepted 3 straight Joe Burrow passes in the second half. And we talked about the Browns turning over the ball. That's an area they need to clean up, and they need to clean it up against Chicago because Chicago will take the ball away. And if you turn it over, it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. All of a sudden, that's the kind of game Chicago has a better chance to win, right? That's how they want to play. They want to get turnovers on defense, play a close game, run the ball, and then have the quarterback maybe make a play or two. So I think it's a really good test for the Browns, especially if, you're going to be without Jarvis Landry. You're going to be without a couple guys on defense. Like I think it's going to be a tougher game than maybe when we're sitting in July looking at the schedule. Oh, Chicago's an easy win. I think this is going to be a grinded out type of game because that's how Chicago plays.
So just give it to Hunt, give it to Chubb, make sure Baker doesn't make any mistakes, which he hasn't been. And, you can come out on top in a grind them out type of game. And as you said, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, that's what we do here. Is Odell playing or not? Yeah, I know you already discussed it, but this might be. Do you think it really is just a mental deal at this point?
I think he will play. I would not bet the house, but I would put it at, I don't know, 75%. Maybe I'd probably put it above 75% that he plays. And that's just me, kind of connecting some dots. And I do, Chud, I think it is mental. And that's not a knock on Odell, right? I mean, I'm not an elite athlete, never have been. I've never had a major injury, again, knock on wood. But first of all, he's looked great since I've seen him in June. And just because a guy runs routes and, is catching passes on air does not mean he's game ready. But he's looked game ready for a while. Even watching him in team drills toward the end of the preseason, he looked ready to me. And I think the Browns thought he was going to give him some snaps in week 1. I think it was a surprise that he got to Kansas City and said, hey, I can't give you the number of snaps you need me to give you. And the only reason for that is he's not at a comfort level. And I don't think that's necessarily about the physical structure of the knee. I think it's just all of it. The comeback, the fact it's only been 10 months since the surgery, all those things play into it. Man, what if I get hit? Like a lot goes into it besides, I can run and cut. So when I talk about mental, that's what I'm talking about. It's just, is he comfortable enough saying, yes, I'm going to go risk it in real game action? And I think the injury to Jarvis will be the push that Odell needed.
And last thing, I'm glad I just remembered this. And as you mentioned earlier, you are obviously on Twitter. You are a man of the tweets. Did you see what Odell tweeted a couple days ago?
Yeah, about in relation to Jarvis, like we're going to hold it down?
No, he said, God. He said, God, I want to take this time to thank you in advance for what's about to come.
Yeah, he talks to God on Twitter a lot. And I assume that's about the comeback. He also tweeted a GIF of like a cheetah in a cage and everybody else was out in front. I think that means everybody got a head start, but look out when I finally play. So, you got to be, you got to read between the lines. You got to be a little bit of a, psychotherapist to interpret all of Odell's social media. But I do think he'll be back soon. It's a matter of, is it this week, or week 4, week 5? But I get the feeling it'll be this week, and I think we'll probably know Wednesday or Thursday if he's going to be up against Chicago, and then that'll help build the excitement, and then that gives you. We talk about a grinded out game. If you have Odell and you pair him with Anthony Schwartz, that gives you an explosive element on offense that maybe separates you from what Chicago can do.
Hey, for all those that weren't able to go to the game on Sunday, I was not there. You were. What was it like? Was it rocking? How it looked like it was pretty decent on TV.
Yeah, it was loud. Kevin Stefanski, all the guys talked about how they felt. It was a great atmosphere. It affected the game. I think people listened, and for the most part, were in their seats at opening kickoff, like Stefanski asked them to be. It felt good. It felt loud. It was nice to have the full crowd, given what 2020 was like. The Muni lot was insane. You saw the videos of everybody lining up on Saturday. I do think it's interesting. And Baker said this a couple of years ago. I'm sure you remember, Chud. I forget what it was. It was in advance of a big game, and he said, "Hey, we need everybody to be in the seats. We need everybody to be loud." He kind of admonished the fans a little bit, and he brought that up again after the game on Sunday, and said, "This is how it needs to be, right? There's too much tradition in this franchise for other teams not to come in here and be worried about our fans being loud, right?" And I think he kind of compared it to Kansas City, right? Places where you go and it's going to be loud. Even Pittsburgh, it's going to be loud when you go to Pittsburgh. And I think because the Browns are so bad for so long, First Energy lost that reputation just because the fans didn't have a reason to show up, right? They didn't have a reason to fill the stadium. They didn't have a reason to be super loud. And that's changed. And Baker wants people to realize that and appreciate it and make it the true home field advantage that if you're old enough, you remember at the old stadium, how loud it got and how much of an advantage that was. So he kind of tried to drive home that point after the game. And I thought that was interesting because he still feels like, I think he still feels like the fans need to prove that consistently just because they haven't had to because the team wasn't any good.
All right, prediction time. So just like I, gave ourselves credit for almost predicting the score right, and we're 2-0 by predicting the wins and losses, I'm also going to let everyone know that, well, at least I'm 0-2 when it comes to Vegas. You got the spread right week 1, right?
Correct. I'm 1-1 against the spread.
Okay, so spread, you're 1-1. I'm 0-2. Straight up, we're both 2-0. What do you think? I'll let you go first this week. Right now, from what I checked, and I checked about an hour ago, I don't know if it's changed, and we're taping this on Tuesday morning. I got Browns -7.5 is what I've seen.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. and this is not any kind of a cop out on my on my part, but I have it real close to the number, Chud. I think it's 27-20 Browns. I think if they got off to a lead early, no matter who plays quarterback for Chicago, I think if the Browns jumped on top by 10 or 14, that would change my prediction, right? Then I would have them covering because I think Chicago's not a team that's going to come back on you. But given the Jarvis Landry injury, given Chicago's defense, and like we just talked about, I think it's going to be a closer game than maybe fans would hope, right? You want a comfortable win. I'm not sure it plays out like that. I think Chicago is just too solid for the Browns to run away. So I'm going 27-20 Browns, which, I guess you have to wait till Sunday morning to see exactly where the line settles, because right now that's not a cover, but Sunday morning it could be a cover.
This is amazing. This is truly amazing. Very, very close.
Okay.
Last week, we both had the exact same score, and I wrote it down this morning. I have Browns 26, Bears 20.
Wow, Chud.
1 point off of what you just predicted.
And again, we do not talk about this ahead of time. No,
we do not talk about this before. That's crazy.
I do think there could be. I think there could be. The Browns could score a defensive touchdown this week, and I don't know if that makes a difference. If that just wins the game for them, 27-20, or that pushes it from, if that pushes it to 34-20 or 30-20. Like that was the discussion I was having last night when I was settling in on this prediction. Is okay. I feel like they get a big turnover this week. I feel like they score defensively. Now, how does that change the score? So that's what I kind of fought with, but I'm still going to go 27-20 just because I think there could be offensive struggles. Again, without Landry, we don't know about Odell, and just that Chicago defense is a legitimate defense.
Yeah, I feel it's going to be a similar score to the Bengals-Bears game last week. What was that, 20-17?
2017, yeah.
Yeah, I just think the Browns will score a little bit more. I think at the end of the day, they'll wear them down with Chubb and Hunt and that offensive line. I think the Browns win regardless if Odell plays or not. And I think that I agree with everything you said. It's not going to be easy. You might not walk away saying, the Browns are going to, win the Super Bowl. But you're also going to be pretty darn excited that they're 2-1. And to be quite honest with you, that's where I had them coming into the season was losing to the Chiefs and winning these next two. And then we're going to head to Minnesota, and that's where things get interesting because in my mind, I don't have that penciled in as a win. And I think that's one of those games that's going to kind of decide where their win total ends up at the end of the year. And I know that sounds stupid because obviously every game does, but I guess that's kind of one of those make or break games that I'm kind of in between on is what I mean on that. Yeah. So, and we'll talk about that next week, but I think we're on the same page. And hey, if you're planning on betting the game, you might as well take the Browns to cover because, I'm saying they're not going to cover because they only win by 6. But bottom line is, we don't care about Vegas. We care about the wins and losses. And that's what we hope that they get done on Sunday.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree with that. I would say that how the game starts probably plays a big role in how it finishes, especially this week, because I don't think Chicago can come back. And if you're the Browns, I think they could come back, but I think they have less of a chance to come back if you're relying on your tight ends and your running backs, you're not going to be as explosive. You're not built to come back as well. And I think the Browns are built to come back more than Chicago is. But I think a good start is more important this week than it is in other weeks. So, hey, Chud, thanks so much for the time. It was another really good discussion. We'll do it again next week. Hopefully we got our predictions right again, and we can gloat about that next week. So thanks, everybody, for listening. You can get all my stories on brownzone.com. And this has been another edition of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Thanks.